Welcome back to Metropole Television. You are watching Business AM. Be part of the conversation. 20146. That's your SMS line. We're going to sample some of your views at the tail end of our show this morning. We are also joined by Mr. Edward Kusewa. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Karibu sana. All right, we're going to tell you exactly what the top headlines you're waking up to this morning and exactly how they will affect the weight of the money in your pocket. All right, let's have a jump into the first one this morning that we're looking at now. You're going to be forced, therefore, to pay more for this. But it looks as if it is complicated than we know of it now. Consumers may soon, therefore, have to spend more on sugar should the government agree to effect a sugar levy that will be borne by consumers. Now, the proposed levy is part of a raft of measures that a task force on the sugar industry has proposed to help revitalize the troubled sugar industry. I just want us to leave it there first before we tell you exactly what the numbers are when we're talking about the sugar space in the country. Mr. Kusewa, let's start from there. Is it too late for us to start talking about revitalizing the sugar industry in the country?
I think basically it's not too late, but I think we should be able to deal with the real issues. What made the sugar industry go under? I mean, that's the starting point.
Yes.
And I think the reforms that are being done currently could be seen well, but I think they're not the real issues that were underlying and hurting the sugar industry in the past. I mean, there are quite a lot of issues. Putting levies, reintroduction of a sugar levy as what has been done has not really been the problem of the past. So we really needed to analyze the whole sugar sector and interrogate it and come up with the real issues that brought that sugar industry to a halt.
Oh, pretty much. Now, it turns out, Mr. Kusewa, that they figured it out. Okay, let's have a look at the cost of producing sugar in the country. We're going to look at only a ton of sugar. Now, the cost of producing sugar in Kenya is comparatively higher than that of other sugar-producing countries within the Comesa region. Now, studying between $600 to $700 per ton, okay, equivalent to 60,000 or to 70,000 shillings per ton. That is twice the cost of other key sugar producing Comesa countries such as Malawi and Swaziland, making Kenya an attractive export market for Comesa and challenging the business case for domestic sugar production. Let's just leave it there. I mean, we are producing at twice the amount that other Comesa sugar producing countries are producing it. What led to this level, Mr. Kusewa, when you really think about the cost of producing our own sugar?
I think the sugar industry has been a very complicated sector for the last 2 decades, so to speak. If you were to go by economics and the terms like rules of origin have been actually something that we've not been able to really understand. I mean, where does our sugar come from?
Yes.
Nobody's able to tell us with a lot of confidence where this sugar is coming from, because we have floated the rules of origin, even within the Comesa, because the rules of origin, we must understand where our sugar comes from.
Yes.
And so there are a lot of sugar producing countries, not just within the Comesa, but globally, countries like India and countries like Brazil, for instance.
Yes.
And so I think this thing has been done on purpose to increase our cost of production in this part of the world, so that the people who do the importation could look for other better places where the cost of production is actually very low to bring in sugar into our country.
Yes. Now, just so that we know where this levy is going to, because now we do know that among the recommendations of the task force report is that we exempt VAT from sugar and then introduce a levy. Treat it like other basic commodities like flour in the country, which is VAT exempt. Good. That is fine. But this 7% levy they're talking about is going to make Kenyans pay more for this commodity. Now listen to where they want it to go to. Number one, improve infrastructure in the areas where we have sugar production. Number two, go into cane research. And number three, come up with proper factories for processing the sugar. But you'd like to think, therefore, Mr. Kusewa, that when we're talking about infrastructure, when we're talking about sugarcane research, when we're talking about coming up with factories, this is duly just a mandate for the national government, and it is provided for. So why are we now turning back and using this levy for the same functions should the government want to come up with proper agriculture, which we do know is in the Big Four agenda, that this is something that they could do without introducing a levy?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean,
Yes.
the task force, in my view,
Yes.
did not do a job that a task force should be able to do.
Yes.
I mean, some of their recommendations are things that have been there for a very long time, so to speak. And so we wonder why this levy is going to do the work of the national government when it comes to infrastructure development that increases in efficiency, for
Yes.
example. That is a job or a role that the national government should have put in place when the sugar sector started operating way back in the 4 decades that we've had independence. So it's really very funny why we are now introducing a sugar levy to start doing the basics, as you're saying, and you're extremely right
Yes,
about it.
pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I just want us to look at sugar consumption levels in the country, therefore, just to understand where we are. Good. Sugar consumption has been increasing since 2016. At 2018, sugar consumption in Kenya was about 980,000 metric tons. Now, when you look at our levels of production, therefore, vis-a-vis what we need to produce, which is 980,000 metric tons, can we say that this is a balance too far for us to get in the short term? Is it okay for us to say, well, let's look for ways of probably saying that Kenya's sugar industry is already wiped out. It's too late for us to bring it up now. Let's balance our trade somewhere else. It's 980,000 metric tons.
I mean, the productivity of our sugar cane farmers really has gone down.
Yes.
Because of the various reasons that is outside there, which include the cost of inputs and the cost of production.
Yes.
And the efficiencies and obviously the return on investment for some of these sugar farmers. And so since the demand has gone up, then obviously we are not competitive anymore.
Yes.
I mean, if you put all these factors into place, then we are not competitive as we should be. And therefore this calls for new strategies. Maybe we may start importing from other sugar producing countries like
Yes.
Comesa. But then the rules of importation and the
Yes.
rules of trade really matter.
Yes.
Because you know who's importing this sugar. Are we sure that the rules of origin will be followed?
Yes.
These are the Comesa compliance rules, that if we are getting sugar from those countries that you've mentioned, Malawi, is it really coming from Malawi or is it coming from another source? So this is where the problem of sugar has been.
Yes.
Rules of origin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting you should be talking about rules of origin, therefore,
Yeah.
because the numbers that we have also paint a very bad picture on exactly what our sort of our scale of consumption has been. So let's look at the imports that have been coming into the country, Mr. Kusewa. Now we've also been gradually going up since 2014, reaching a peak in 2017 before declining to 284,200 tons in 2018. Why are we talking about coming up with a proper sugar industry in the country when in reality, since 2014 to date, the only thing we've been doing is killing it? I mean, our imports have been going gradually up. So somebody looking at it will say, wow, I mean, you've not been supporting it since 2014, you've just been importing. So what are these trends that we want to change all of a sudden in 2020 by saying, okay, let's bring it up? I mean, we have been importing. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, from the time that the task force was formed was in 2018.
Yes.
And today is 2020. And what you're saying is that there's been a lot of importation within that framework or within that time frame. And so reforming this industry at this time is really tricky.
Yes.
I mean, it's all about competition. Are we competitive enough for us to be able to sustain the sector? And indeed, if we are not competitive, then the best thing is to be able to look at other sources and leave all these reforms that look very cosmetic and look for a real solution. And that's why we are saying we don't deal with real solutions when it comes to agriculture in this
Yes.
part of the country. But anyway, since it's a task force that was formed by the president, I think they have a mandate to come up with recommendations and see whether it's going to work. But truly, it is not going to be competitive compared to what is happening elsewhere.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, now interesting.
And I
you
don't
should-
think,
Yes.
and by the way,
Yes.
if you look at the law of comparative advantage, I don't think we have a comparative advantage in sugar industry anymore.
Yes.
I think we'd better, keep on importing it and be able to see how we can be able to balance out our balance of payments and our trade relations with other commercial countries
Mr.
and concentrate on other things.
Yes.
But if the farmers feel they can sustain it, then we have to give them an opportunity to see whether they can get a livelihood from this
Isn't it?
sector.
So now, the two ways that we can look at it this morning, Mr. Kusewa, let's just look at exactly the market share that is in the country vis-a-vis where the government really wants to take this. Because even as we speak right now, the bigger titans like Mumia Sugar, they're no longer. I mean, KCB went for Mumia Sugar.
Yeah.
And we've not, even as we talk about this, we've not been told exactly where this is headed. Okay, let's look at the market share, therefore, in the country as we talk about it this morning. It is followed, okay, let's look at the biggest one, which is West Kenya Sugar Company, which has a 30.1% share. It is followed by Sukari Factory, 21.4%, Butali Sugar Mills, 17.7%, Transmara Sugar at 5.2%, Zoya Sugar, 5%, South Nyanza Sugar, 4.4%, Muhoroni Sugar, 3.7%, Mumia Sugar, now, that's a big one, 1.9%, and Chembele Sugar at 1.1%. That one pretty much gives you a clear graph that when the government gets itself in the nose of business in this country, we start talking about Chembele 1.1, Mumias 1.9, Mumias 1.9%, Muhoroni 3.7%. But private-owned companies, you can actually see them, the likes of Sukari Factory, 21.4%. We're talking about Butali Sugar, 17.7%. They're the ones that are leading in this business. So when we're talking about addressing this national issue, are we talking about supporting these private companies, which have shown us that yes, even as you're talking about the sugar industry dying, that we can actually figure ourselves out within this industry? Should the task force be looking at privatizing them, all these public companies that we're talking about in sugar, and that will give us a solution?
Yeah, I mean, private sector development obviously brings in efficiencies. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
But if you look at the most progressive countries with sugar, like, for example, India, some of the sugar mills are nationalized.
Yes.
And they still make profits. I think when you keep on nationalizing some of these companies in Africa, then there's an erosion of profit because
Yes.
of bad governance and governance structure.
Yes.
And so then the best thing in African economies is to privatize some of these nationalized industries, to give them to private hands. But then you must understand the politics behind the sugar sector in Kenya, how the private sector has been the one being used by the government to kill its own industry.
Yes.
But let's hope that, as we continue to privatize some of our nationalized institutions, that we are going to get, economies of scale, and we are going to get efficiencies that were not accruing from the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you see this as a short-term plan? Because if you really look at when the task force was formed, it's been 2014. It's been 6 years down the line. It's now 2020. I mean, what were they doing during these 6 years? What report makes you take 6 years for you to table it in 2020, Mr. Kusewa?
And even when you look at the recommendations for those 6 years are not very, deep. They don't provide a lot of deep insights.
Isn't it? And there have been other reports within the sugar industry that have also been tabled, but I've never seen the light of the day.
I mean, if you were to do research for 6 years, you should come with recommendations that make the sugar sector extremely competitive to compete with some of these big producing countries.
Yes.
6 years should be evidence-based research that produces some of the best results for the sugar industry. But for you to come up with the almost 3 or 4 recommendations after 6 years, really.
That is what we start to speak, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, just to cap this conversation there, from the biggest recommendation from what we can see there, and which is going to affect the Kenyan citizens, should therefore this report see the light of the day, is that they are going to be forced to pay more. That's fine, they'll take VAT out of it, but doesn't mean that this commodity is not going to be expensive, which we do know, as we do know now, is very expensive as well. Is it important? Why are you making it expensive, therefore? Should it be cheaper, therefore, if you want to prop up this industry?
And that's where the disconnect is. I mean, Kenya is a tax-based system that keeps on taxing its citizens.
Yes.
You increase the cost of commodities. People have to dig deeper into their pockets to be able to have a cost of living. I think it's unsustainable. I mean, when the cost of goods go up, I mean, people stop consuming them.
Interesting.
Generally, that's just a basic economic rule.
Yes.
I mean, those who could afford sugar they take it, and those who can't afford sugar will just have to leave it.
Yes.
So I mean, you keep on increasing the cost, and that hurts the economy, because when demand goes down, because people are not able to remove money and buy your goods, then that affects the general production, even in the private sector.
Pretty much.
The best thing has been to bring prices down.
Yes.
So that everybody participates in the economic system.
Yes.
But so long as the prices keep on going up, then it means there's a group of people who definitely will look at sugar as an expensive commodity and look for alternatives, either stop taking it altogether or look for other alternatives, like maybe eating food rather than taking their usual, tea and so on and so forth. So we really need to spur, consumption by and increasing demand by making commodities cheaper for the population.
And that is the talking point this morning, isn't it? I want you to get involved. Talk to us 2146 this morning. And I just want us to go to the next story, if you may, now. So we look at exactly what is affecting the weight of the money in your pocket this morning. Because now we do know there's a proposed merger between Kobil and Gulf Energy. It actually has gotten an approval from the Competition Authority of Kenya, which has approved the proposed acquisition of control of Gulf Energy Holdings Limited by Kobil PLC. Now, merged Kobil Gulf Energy outfit will increase its market share of service stations to 21.2%, giving Rubis a lead position in the fuel retail business. But the regulator says this market strength is not dominant and will face competition from other oil marketers who control 78.8% of the fuel retail market. Now, data from the Petroleum Institute of East Africa indicates that there are 96 oil marketing companies in Kenya operating over 3,000 service stations. More than half of these service stations are owned by independent players. Now, Total owns 16.4% of all these service stations, followed by Vivo 16.2%, Kobil 15.4%, Oil Libya 6.9%, Gulf 5.8%, NOC 4.4%, Galana 2.7%, Petrol Oil, that is around also 2.4%, and B Energy at 1.85%. Now, how will the presence of these several competitor petrol stations in close proximity to merged entity stations in downstream market of a vital competitive restraint? And is the merger, as noted by CAK, also unlikely to lessen or prevent competition in the participation of oil marketing companies in the monthly crude oil import open tenders run by the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum? Last question, should there be a worry on the merger of Kobil and Gulf Energy, as it will give the combined entity control of 71% of all the jet fuel consumed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport? Many talking points from here.
Absolutely.
For any Kenyan listening, therefore, and say, wow, there's another merger that is happening in the country. But oil prices don't tend to change that much as per independent sellers in the country. So how would a Kenyan digest this piece today in the morning?
I think the merger is good. I worked for Kobil myself, yes. And Kobil really had some losses yes. in the past, and I think they got some private equity fund, put money in their business, and therefore they were bought by Rubis. And so now I think there's now going to be a merger between Kobil and Gulf Energy, which is obviously going to increase the current market share that they have been having. But you must understand that Kobil has been the market leader for a very long time.
Yes.
Because, I mean, retail stations give you business, but commercial oil business is where there's business.
Yes.
If you're servicing, for example, the KDF, for example, Kenya Power and Lightning, I mean, those big key accounts, then you're definitely a leader in that part. So, retail stations don't have as much market shares as when you're servicing some of these big commercial accounts, like government accounts.
Yes. Yes.
But obviously it's going to give them, because they have really dropped down with their service stations, they're going now to have a bigger market share. As far as downstream is concerned.
Yes.
And I think that's going to increase part of them, their profits.
Yes.
You must understand that Kobil has been having a loss of about 6 billion.
Actually, and we do know exactly the news that we're talking about back from 2018 to 2019 as well, isn't it? Yes.
I don't know where they get the confidence and where they get the money. I think Rubis must have pumped more money for them to be able to acquire Gulf Energy.
Yes.
But Kobil really is a local multinational that was actually formed in this country.
Yes.
And it had a lot of political clout back in the day. So that helped it get market share with government back in the day. But this is good for them.
Yes.
And if the competition authority feels that it's giving them an edge, let them go ahead and let's see how business will be.
Yes. Of that note, though, is that now they will be controlling 71% of the petroleum that is consumed by the aviation industry in Kenya. Do you think that that would make the other companies in Kenya look like, well, that's an unfair advantage, therefore, when we're talking about this business in the country?
Well, it's all about competition. It's not very much unfair.
Yes.
Because the airlines have a choice to buy from whoever they want.
Yes.
I mean, if they feel that maybe this merger is not giving them value for their money, then there are all other competitors and there are other oil marketers like Vivo, Total, who they could channel. I mean, it's all about procurement processes.
Yes.
So if they are giving superior and quality fuel and their terms of reference and their terms of condition are good, then the oil industry continues. I mean, it's not a monopolistic
yes.
trend of the way they operate. I mean, anybody can choose. You can choose where you fuel. Any company can choose who gives them fuel. It just depends on their quality and their standards.
Yes.
And obviously the pricing. In the oil sector, you must realize those points, percentage points are the ones that give you a
just
competitive edge
over
over your competitors.
Yes.
But I mean, if they've been given an okay, then the competition authority feels it's a fair game to move on.
Pretty much, isn't it, Mr. Kusewa? I just want us to jump into the next big one. This has been a contagious issue. I myself have my feelings about it, and so many people now are coming in. We've seen the Central Bank of Kenya now, we've seen CAK as well, we've seen the government also talk down on them, but there seems to be no solution. This morning, what we're talking about, now the Competition Authority of Kenya intends to carry out a sector study into the regulated and unregulated digital credit markets. Now, the idea is to restrain digital lenders who lure unsavvy consumers to their traps. Now, digital lenders have in the recent past been accused of not making full disclosures, engaging in unauthorized use of personal data and records of their clients, or are taking advantage of weak consumer protection laws to exploit the victims. Now, the main objective of the study, financed by the Innovations for Poverty Action, is to identify and address potential consumer protection concerns covering both formal and informal digital credit markets. Now, the Competition Authority seeks to establish size and nature of digital markets, identify potential consumer protection risks, and ensure consumers are aware of all terms and conditions as well as product information before taking out a digital loan. Other issues that CAK wants to look into are how to deal with fraud in the digital space, safeguard personal data and information, as well as ensure consumers are protected across all digital platforms. It's still grey.
It's very grey.
It's still grey.
Yeah, I mean, in this space of digital lending, I think we need a lot of regulation.
Yes.
But again, you must understand also where the consumers come from.
Yes.
I mean, we've been having a lack of financial inclusion. People want money. They cannot access credit from banks because they don't have collateral and so on and so forth. And so these people who are calling themselves digital lenders have been able to take advantage of that space.
Yes.
And start, giving money unregulated.
Yes.
And people want their products. It's all about demand and supply. And so long as people want their products, they'll always take advantage of the fact that there's no consumerism and people don't understand how these things operate.
Yes.
And therefore, they'll always take an advantage over some of these consumers overboard.
Yes. And I want to take you back, Mr. Kusewa, if you may really, to now the kind of news that we're getting in this area. Central Bank of Kenya, just the other day, were telling us that if you look comparatively at all these digital lenders, some of them charge upwards of 300% per annum in interest rates in an area when we don't want to call them banks per se, but in an area where banks are heavily regulated. We've seen what the MPC is doing, bring down the interest rates if you want to operate within Kenya. Good, that's fine. But CAK comes also and tells us now they're also going in just to make sure that when they actually offer these services to the customers, they're within law. Can I ask you, what law are we talking about here? Who should actually go in and regulate the digital lenders? Is it the Central Bank of Kenya? Is it the Competition Authority? Why is it very hard for us to sit down as a country and say that this is the direction that we want to move? Number one, is it because most of these digital lenders are supported by the Kenyan banks in the country?
I think there's a lot of non-disclosure of how things are operating, but the regulator is the central bank
Yes.
of Kenya.
Yes.
That is the person who has been given the mandate to be able to regulate financial institutions,
Yes.
financial lending, and I don't see where competition authority comes
It's
in to
coming in,
tame
isn't it?
digital lenders. But then, I mean, digital lenders are taking advantage of the space that is there. People want money
Yes.
to be able to do their day-to-day businesses. SMEs want some little money, and they cannot get this from the other financial institutions that are regulated. So then these digital lenders, with their 300%, offer solutions on a real-time basis for some of these people who want quick cash.
Yes.
And that is where the central bank should be able to come up with strategies and think about ways to get to these people who are going to digital lenders and see how they can bring them or rope them into financial institutions.
Yes.
There is, in fact, a very big gap. And the question is, where are people, even with the 300%,
Yes.
still looking at digital lenders? Why?
Is it because, Mr. Kusewa, this one is a bit talk about it, therefore, we do know that banks actually offer comparatively cheaper services when it comes to lending as opposed to digital lenders in the country? Is it because that there has been this push for this shift, therefore, that for you to operate here as a financial services provider, we don't want to call them banks now, because I know the Central Bank of Kenya will come and say, well, the Banking Act doesn't cover digital lenders.
Absolutely.
But can we come up with laws where we say, as a financial services provider, you gotta be in here? Which pretty much means there hasn't been a sustained push from the government and the Central Bank of Kenya, therefore, to align these digital lenders to exactly where they want them to be. Is that where the problem begins?
That's where the problem is, because
Yes.
I mean, as we move into the future, there are a lot of products that are coming out of innovation.
Yes.
That are, fintech-led.
Yes.
Or technology-led, for that instance. And therefore, the central bank should be able to open its mind and understand, look, we have these people here. How do we rope them in? What kind of regulation, what kind of space can
Yes.
we be able to give them? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to ask you something, because yes, Mr. Kusewa, you say, but then people will tell you there's this term you've used about financial inclusion. Is it time for us to really think about what financial inclusion is? Because you cannot talk about financial inclusion when everybody is complaining about the services that you're actually using within that term for financial inclusion.
When you look at emerging economies and when
Yes.
you look at emerging markets,
Yes.
there are certain peculiar ways in which people want to interact with money.
Yes.
People in emerging and developing economies don't have a lot of interactions with banks.
Yes.
To them, banks don't make sense. They want things that make sense to them because of their low levels of income.
Yes.
Things like mobile money. M-Pesa makes a lot of sense to them because then it doesn't have all these processes. It doesn't have KYCs. It doesn't have going to, it doesn't have legacy kind of processes that banks have and that kind of scrutiny that banks want. There's a way people at the low income countries want to operate with finances.
Yes.
And that's why digital lenders have been able to get so much profits out of these low income economies, because they have products that these people want. It's just that they charge too much. And I think we need to look at a new wave of strategy and a paradigm shift in the way we lend money to people in developing countries. A country like Kenya, with its population that lives in slums, they even in their own slums have their own way of doing business and getting some Bangla kind of cash. I think the central bank needs to really analyze and see that people in this part of the region need a different way of doing business. It's not about the unbanked, because you'll never bring these people into the banking system anyway. And I think that's why M-Pesa is so successful. And now the digital lenders, the branch and all these other financial interventions are really becoming successful, because this is what the Kenyans want. This is what people at low levels want. And I think I've been speaking to financial sector deepening and hearing what they have to say about how to include people financially. People are looking for solutions that meet their needs. And so if these digital lenders are meeting their needs, people are going to borrow from them. So we need a new strategy, new thinking, new paradigm shift to change the way business is being done.
Indeed. All right, this morning we were speaking to Mr. Edward Kusewa, sorry. Now, good thing about YouTube is that you can actually take him back to when he started this conversation. So you can actually get to listen to his sentiments, especially on key issues this morning. That is on the sugar industry, the energy, and the financial services sector. He says we need to rethink on who we give these services to and what they really need from us if we are supposed to talk about financially including them. This is Business. I'm Mr. Kusewa. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Asante
As
sana.
always.
All right,
Thank you.
all right.
Yeah.